Snoop Dogg stepped into the grand lobby of the Braxton Hotel, his unmistakable swagger drawing every eye in the room. By his side was James, a homeless black veteran whose tattered clothes and weary face stood in stark contrast to the hotel's opulence. The hotel owner, Henry Braxton, glanced at James with disdain, his voice dripping with arrogance as he said, "This isn't the kind of place for someone like you." What happened next left everyone in the room speechless and marked the end of Henry's career. The setting sun cast an amber glow over the city streets, the hustle and bustle of downtown contrasting sharply with the quiet dignity of James Carter, a homeless black veteran in his 50s. Wrapped in a tattered military jacket adorned with faded patches of his service, James sat near the entrance of the Braxton Grand Hotel, one of the city's most luxurious establishments. A small, handwritten sign in his lap read, "Veteran in need. Anything helps." The cold wind bit through James's jacket, but his posture remained upright, his head held high despite his circumstances. Passers-by either avoided eye contact or offered fleeting glances of pity. He didn't ask for much, just enough to get by, but he hoped that someone might see him for who he truly was, a man who had once served his country with pride. From the opulent hotel doors emerged Henry Braxton, the owner. Dressed in a sharp gray suit that screamed power and privilege, Henry paused, his eyes narrowing at the sight of James. His polished shoes clicked against the marble steps as he approached, the disdain on his face unmistakable. "What do you think you're doing here?" Henry's voice was icy, his words cutting through the evening air. "You're scaring off my customers." James looked up, meeting Henry's gaze with calm determination. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just needed a place to sit. I served in the army, sir, and I've fallen on hard times." Henry scoffed, crossing his arms. "Oh, so now being a veteran gives you a free pass to loiter? This is private property. I suggest you move along before I call the police." The harshness of Henry's tone drew a few glances from pedestrians, but no one intervened. James, ever respectful, rose slowly to his feet. "I meant no disrespect," he said, his voice steady. "I've given my best years to this country. I'm just asking for a little kindness." But Henry wasn't listening. "Kindness won't pay my bills," he snapped. "Go beg somewhere else." James nodded, his dignity intact even as he gathered his belongings and prepared to leave. It wasn't the first time he had been treated this way, but it still stung. As he turned to walk away, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. Out stepped a man whose presence radiated charisma and confidence. Snoop Dogg. The quiet tension outside the Braxton Grand Hotel shattered as the sleek black car door swung open, and Snoop Dogg stepped onto the sidewalk. Wearing a golden black tracksuit, diamond-studded sunglasses, and his signature swagger, the rap legend's presence was magnetic. Passers-by froze, pulling out phones to snap pictures or record videos. Snoop adjusted his glasses, his sharp gaze scanning the scene. He immediately noticed the confrontation between James, the homeless veteran, and the sharply dressed hotel owner, Henry Braxton. His instincts kicked in as he approached, every step deliberate. The crowd, now drawn by both the celebrity and the tension in the air, began to grow. Henry turned to the commotion, his annoyance evident. At first, he didn't recognize Snoop, and instead saw only another potential disruption to his pristine hotel entrance. "Can I help you?" Henry asked, his tone cold and dismissive. Snoop smiled coolly, tilting his head slightly. "Nah, man, but it looks like you could help him," he said, pointing toward James. His voice was calm but carried a weight that demanded attention. Henry's face tightened. "This is private property," he said curtly, "and I don't need anyone interfering with how I run my business." Snoop let out a soft chuckle, removing his sunglasses. The crowd murmured as more people realized who he was. "Oh, I see how it is," Snoop said, his voice dripping with calm authority. "Man out here wearing his service on his sleeves, literally, and you treat him like trash? That what you call running a business?" Henry stiffened. "Look, I don't know who you think you are, but this man is loitering. It's bad for business." Snoop's smile faded, replaced by a look of quiet intensity. "Who I think I am? I'm Snoop Dogg, nephew. But that's not the point. This man," he said, motioning to James, "put his life on the line so folks like you could enjoy the freedom to run your little hotel. And this is how you repay him?" The crowd began murmuring louder. A young woman in the front whispered, "That's Snoop Dogg. What's he doing here?" Henry's arrogance began to falter as he realized the growing crowd wasn't on his side. "Look," he said, his tone less confident, "this isn't about his service. It's about rules. I can't have people sitting around outside my hotel." Snoop turned to James, his expression softening. "What's your name, OG?" he asked. "James Carter," the veteran replied, standing tall despite the circumstances. "Well, Mr. Carter, you don't have to explain yourself to anyone," Snoop said. "But if you want to sit here, you're welcome too. I got your back." The crowd erupted into applause, and Henry's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "This is ridiculous," he exclaimed. "You can't just—" "Ridiculous is treating a vet like this," Snoop cut in, his voice sharp now. "But don't worry, big man. I'll handle this." Snoop turned to James. "You hungry, bro?" James hesitated, then nodded. "It's been a while." Without missing a beat, Snoop waved toward his car. "Yo, grab some food from the back," he called to his driver. Moments later, bags of fresh takeout were brought over and handed to James. The onlookers cheered, and some began recording the scene. Henry looked increasingly uncomfortable as his poor treatment of James became a spectacle. "See?" Snoop said, addressing the crowd and Henry simultaneously. "It don't take much to show respect. A little food, a little kindness. That's all it takes to make a man feel seen." James, holding the food, looked at Snoop with gratitude. "Thank you, sir," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "You don't gotta thank me," Snoop replied. "Thank you for your service." Henry, still fuming but clearly outmatched, opened his mouth to speak but found no words. His authority had been completely dismantled, and the growing support for James and Snoop left him isolated. As the scene quieted down, Snoop turned to Henry one last time. "Now maybe instead of running your mouth, you should run your business with some decency. You might learn something." Henry Braxton's arrogance was on full display as he dismissed Snoop Dogg's and James's efforts to plead for fair treatment. With a smug grin and an air of superiority, Henry sneered, "This isn't the place for people like him. My clientele expects exclusivity." His words stung, laced with the venom of deep-seated prejudice. James, visibly hurt but composed, stepped back. But Snoop wasn't about to let this slide. Standing tall, Snoop leveled his calm but piercing gaze at Henry. "So, you're saying a man who served his country doesn't deserve basic respect?" Snoop's voice was steady, but his words carried the weight of undeniable truth. Patrons of the hotel began to notice the escalating confrontation. Several pulled out their phones, eager to document the scene. Whispers rippled through the growing crowd as passers-by stopped to see what was happening. Some people gasped at Henry's blatant dismissal of James, while others voiced their disgust in hushed tones. Unbothered by Henry's arrogance, Snoop pulled out his phone and began live streaming. "This is Henry Braxton, owner of the Braxton Hotel," he announced to his millions of followers. "This man thinks a veteran who's fallen on hard times doesn't deserve a room." His words reverberated, capturing the attention of thousands watching the livestream. Henry's face reddened as he noticed the growing crowd and the unwavering camera lens directed at him. "This is a private matter," he snapped, attempting to shield his face from the recording. "You have no right to record me." Snoop's reply was swift and cutting. "And you have no right to treat people like they're beneath you. This isn't just about James anymore. It's about how people like you think you can get away with it." The energy shifted. The crowd began to rally behind James. A middle-aged woman stepped forward and handed James a $20 bill. "You don't deserve this," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. A man in a business suit joined in, offering to help James find a temporary shelter. The crowd's support swelled, their small acts of kindness a stark contrast to Henry's heartless behavior. Henry, sensing the tide turning against him, tried to defend himself. "I wasn't being discriminatory," he stammered. "There are rules, and I was just enforcing them." But his weak explanation fell flat in the face of Snoop's powerful livestream. "You're enforcing your own bias," Snoop fired back. "And now the world's seeing exactly who you are." Henry's once smug demeanor faltered as more patrons voiced their disapproval. One woman shouted, "Shame on you, Henry. This is disgraceful." Another man declared loudly, "I'm never staying at this hotel again." The crowd's energy was palpable, their voices a united front against Henry's prejudice. As the live stream continued to gather momentum, the power of public accountability became evident. Henry Braxton's arrogance had been exposed, and the story was far from over. The growing crowd outside the Braxton Hotel buzzed with energy as Snoop Dogg, live stream still running, turned his full attention to James. The homeless veteran stood in silently, his posture weary but his dignity intact. It was clear that he had spent too many days being ignored, but today was different. Today he had someone in his corner. Snoop reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick stack of bills. "Here you go, my man," he said, handing the money to James with a warm smile. "Get yourself some food, a room, and anything else you need to feel like the king you are." James hesitated, his hands trembling as he accepted the cash. His voice cracked with emotion as he murmured, "I don't know what to say. Thank you." The crowd erupted in applause, their support for James growing louder by the second. Snoop wasn't finished. He turned back to his phone, addressing the thousands of viewers now tuned into his live stream. "Listen up, y'all. This man is a veteran who served his country, and this is how he's being treated? We can do better than this. I'm not just helping him today. I'm going to make sure he's set up for life." His words sent shockwaves through the live stream audience. Comments poured in. "Go, Snoop. You're a real one. How can I help James? Drop a donation link." This is what the world needs more of: compassion. The people physically present were just as inspired. A young woman stepped forward, offering James a warm coat she had in her car. "This'll keep you warm until you get back on your feet," she said with a kind smile. Even as support for James grew, Henry Braxton stood rooted in place, his face a mixture of anger and fear. The reality of the situation was starting to dawn on him. His weak attempts at damage control began. "I didn't mean for it to sound like that," Henry stammered, his voice trembling as he addressed Snoop in the crowd. "This is just a misunderstanding. I was only following protocol." Snoop's gaze turned ice cold. "Protocol? That's what you're calling blatant disrespect? Don't twist it, Henry. You knew exactly what you were doing." Henry flinched at the words, glancing nervously at the phone still recording him. I'm sorry if anyone took offense," he said, his tone insincere. The crowd wasn't buying it. "That's not an apology," someone yelled. Another voice chimed in, "You're only sorry because you got caught." Unbothered by Henry's feeble excuses, Snoop focused back on James. "Here's what's going to happen next," he said, his voice steady and full of resolve. "I'm getting you a place to stay tonight, and tomorrow I'm going to make sure you're connected with some veteran support programs. You're not alone in this, brother." James's eyes filled with tears as he nodded. "Thank you, Snoop. Thank you so much." The live stream comments flooded with people asking how they could help. Snoop read a few out loud. "You want to help? I'll set up a fund for James and every other veteran out here getting overlooked. Let's turn this moment into a movement." The crowd cheered, their energy electric. Strangers began pulling out their wallets to hand James money, each small contribution a symbol of their shared compassion. Henry, now pale and visibly shaken, tried one last time to salvage his reputation. "Look, I'm willing to give him a room tonight, free of charge," he offered, his voice trembling. Snoop's expression hardened. "You had your chance, Henry, and you blew it. This isn't about damage control. It's about doing the right thing. Too bad you don't know what that looks like." The crowd roared in agreement. Henry, realizing he had no way to regain control, retreated into the hotel, leaving Snoop, James, and the crowd outside. As the tension subsided, Snoop patted James on the shoulder. "This isn't the end of your story, James. It's just the beginning." The two men walked away, surrounded by supporters and cheers, while the live stream continued to light up with messages of solidarity. Henry Braxton's world was starting to crumble, and the strength of kindness and generosity had stolen the spotlight. The next morning, the world woke up to an explosion of outrage on social media. Snoop Dogg's live stream had gone viral overnight, racking up millions of views and sparking widespread condemnation of Henry Braxton and his hotel. The hashtags #Justice for James and #Boycott Braxton Hotel trended globally, with countless tweets, posts, and comments pouring in. Screenshots and clips of Henry's dismissive behavior circulated online, showing his sneering face as he belittled James. "This is what discrimination looks like," one tweet read, accompanied by a video of Henry's confrontation with Snoop. News outlets quickly picked up the story. Major headlines read, "Snoop Dogg defends homeless veteran in viral video. Hotel owner faces backlash after discriminatory behavior. Racism and homelessness, a call to action." The Braxton Hotel's corporate headquarters couldn't ignore the controversy. By noon, the company issued an official statement. We are appalled by the actions of our employee, Henry Braxton, as seen in the widely circulated video. His behavior does not reflect the values of our organization. We are launching an immediate investigation and taking steps to rectify the situation. But words alone weren't enough to quell the outrage. Customers flooded the hotel's social media pages with one-star reviews, calling out their lack of accountability and threatening to boycott their properties. "I'll never stay at a Braxton hotel again unless they take real action," one comment read, echoing the sentiments of thousands. Meanwhile, Snoop Dogg kept the momentum going. On his Instagram account, he posted a heartfelt message alongside a photo of James smiling in his new coat. "Last night, we showed what happens when people stand up for what's right. But this ain't just about James. It's about every veteran who's been overlooked and disrespected. Time for real change. Let's get to work." The post garnered millions of likes and comments, with fans and celebrities alike praising Snoop's actions. Donations began pouring in from all over the world for the funds Snoop had set up for James and other homeless veterans. Back at the Braxton Hotel, the pressure mounted. Inside sources revealed that bookings had plummeted, with numerous cancellations citing the viral incident. Under immense scrutiny, the corporate office made a decisive move. They terminated Henry Braxton effective immediately and issued a follow-up statement. "Effective today, Henry Braxton is no longer employed by the Braxton Hotel Group. We deeply regret the harm caused and are making a $500,000 donation to veteran support organizations. We are also implementing mandatory staff training on inclusion and respect to ensure this never happens again." For Henry, the fallout was swift and devastating. His name became synonymous with bigotry, and he found himself unable to defend his actions. Reporters hounded him for comments, but Henry avoided the media, retreating into isolation as his career crumbled around him. While Henry faced the consequences of his actions, James's life began to transform. Thanks to the donations and Snoop's advocacy, James was placed in temporary housing within 24 hours. Snoop shared an update with his followers. "James is safe, y'all. We've got him a place to stay, new clothes, and a warm meal. But this is just step one. The fight for our veterans doesn't stop here." The incident became a rallying cry for change. Advocates for veterans' rights used the moment to highlight the systemic issues facing homeless veterans, calling for more funding, housing, and support programs. Snoop continued to amplify their voices, ensuring the movement gained traction. In the days that followed, the Braxton Hotel became a cautionary tale about the dangers of prejudice and the power of collective action. Henry's career was over, but James's story was just beginning. James sat on the edge of the new bed in his temporary housing unit, his hands resting on his knees. For the first time in years, the weight on his shoulders felt lighter. The events of the past few days had been overwhelming, going from being turned away at a hotel door to having millions of people rooting for him. Thanks to Snoop Dogg's live stream and the wave of support it inspired, donations from around the world poured in. Within 48 hours, James's GoFundMe campaign surpassed its goal tenfold. Messages of encouragement flooded the page, many from fellow veterans who empathized with his struggles. "I've been where you are, brother. Stay strong. Thank you for your service. You deserve so much more." Snoop Dogg personally oversaw James's transition into temporary housing, ensuring he had access to food, clothing, and medical care. "We're just getting started, man," Snoop said as he handed James a phone. "You got an appointment tomorrow with a veteran support program. They'll help you with everything: housing, therapy, job training. You ain't alone anymore." The next day, James met with a counselor from the program, a fellow veteran named Lisa, who understood his experiences intimately. Together, they crafted a plan for his recovery. It included therapy sessions to address his PTSD, job training to help him re-enter the workforce, and assistance securing permanent housing. As James shared his story during their sessions, he began to see his life in a new light. The shame he had carried for years, believing he had failed after leaving the military, started to fade. Lisa reminded him of the courage it took to serve and the strength it took to survive homelessness. "You didn't fail," she said firmly. "The system failed you, but now you have the chance to rebuild." Meanwhile, the media buzz around James's story continued to grow. News outlets from across the country reached out, eager to interview the man who had become the face of resilience and hope. At first, James hesitated, unsure if he wanted his struggles laid bare for the world to see. But Snoop encouraged him. Your story can help so many people, James. It's not just about what you've been through. It's about where you're headed. People need to see that there's a way out. With Snoop by his side, James agreed to his first televised interview. Dressed in a new suit provided by donors, he sat across from a journalist in a brightly lit studio, his hands clasped nervously. But as the interview began, James's voice grew steadier. He spoke about his time in the military, his struggles with PTSD, and the harsh realities of life on the streets. I used to think nobody cared, he said, his voice cracking slightly. But then Snoop saw me. He didn't see a homeless man. He saw a human being. And that's all any of us want, to be seen, to be valued. The interview aired nationwide, touching the hearts of millions. Viewers were moved by James's humility and gratitude, and donations continued to pour in. Within weeks, James secured permanent housing in a modest but comfortable apartment. But James's journey didn't end there. Inspired by the outpouring of support, he decided to pay it forward. Using a portion of the funds raised for him, he launched a small business, a food truck serving affordable meals to low-income communities and veterans. He named it The Mission as a tribute to his military service and his mission to help others. The grand opening of The Mission was a community event, with Snoop Dogg as the guest of honor. Crowds gathered to taste the first meals served by James, who worked tirelessly in the kitchen, his face beaming with pride. Snoop gave a short speech, his voice resonating with emotion. James is living proof that one act of kindness can change everything. But let's not stop here. Let's keep this movement alive for every veteran who's out there struggling. The event was covered by local and national media, further amplifying James's story. He quickly became a sought-after speaker at veteran events and advocacy panels, sharing his journey to inspire others. Homelessness doesn't define who you are, he told one audience. What defines you is your will to keep fighting and the people who stand with you. By the end of the year, James's life had transformed completely. His business thrived, his story inspired countless others, and he had built a network of support that reminded him daily he was not alone. For James, the darkest chapter of his life had given way to a new beginning, one filled with purpose, gratitude, and hope. Snoop Dogg sat in his home office, scrolling through countless messages on his phone. His live stream of the hotel encounter had gone viral, sparking a conversation about homelessness, racism, and the treatment of veterans. Celebrities, activists, and ordinary people joined the discussion, amplifying the call for change. But for Snoop, it wasn't just about raising awareness, it was about taking action. Determined to make a lasting difference, Snoop announced the launch of a new initiative, Veterans First. This program would focus on providing housing, job training, and mental health support for homeless veterans across the country. This ain't just for James, Snoop said in a heartfelt video message to his followers. It's for all the brothers and sisters who've served this country and ended up forgotten. That ain't right, and we're going to fix it. Within days, the initiative gained traction. Donations poured in from fans, corporations, and fellow celebrities. Partnering with veteran organizations and housing advocacy groups, Snoop began laying the groundwork for shelters and resource centers in cities with the highest rates of veteran homelessness. One of the first projects under the Veterans First initiative was a shelter in Los Angeles named James's Haven. The facility provided transitional housing, counseling services, and job placement programs. James, now thriving in his new life, was invited to cut the ribbon at the grand opening. His hands trembled slightly as he held the oversized scissors, but his voice was steady as he addressed the crowd. This place isn't just a shelter, James said, his voice filled with emotion. It's a second chance for people like me to find hope again, and that's all thanks to Snoop and all of you who believed in this mission. The event was broadcast live, further spreading the message of compassion and community support. Snoop's initiative began to inspire others, including business leaders who pledged jobs for veterans and lawmakers who introduced new legislation to address homelessness among former service members. Snoop didn't stop there. He took his message directly to the people by hosting a series of community events across the country. These gatherings featured free meals, job fairs, and resource booths for veterans and their families. At each event, Snoop mingled with attendees, sharing laughs, offering encouragement, and reinforcing the idea that everyone deserved dignity and respect. During one such event in Chicago, Snoop stood on a makeshift stage in front of hundreds of people. He held the microphone with his signature charisma, but his tone was serious. "We talk a lot about building walls, but what about building bridges?" he said, looking out at the crowd. "What about lifting each other up instead of tearing each other down? That's what Veterans First is about. It's about saying we see you, we value you, and we're here for you." James often joined Snoop at these events, becoming a powerful voice for change. He shared his personal story with audiences, emphasizing the importance of empathy and collective action. "I'm living proof that one act of kindness can change everything," James told a crowd in Atlanta. "If Snoop hadn't stepped in, I don't know where I'd be today. But this isn't just about me. It's about making sure no one else has to feel invisible." The impact of Snoop's mission rippled far and wide. Stories emerged of other veterans who had been inspired to seek help, people who had donated their time and resources to shelters, and communities that had come together to address local issues of homelessness. Through it all, Snoop remained humble, deflecting praise and redirecting attention to the cause. "This ain't about me," he said in a TV interview. "It's about all of us doing what we can. If everybody just does one small thing to help somebody else, imagine how much better the world would be." By the end of the year, Veterans First had helped hundreds of veterans find housing and support. The initiative became a model for other celebrity-led philanthropic efforts, showing how influence could be used to create real, lasting change. For Snoop, the work was far from over, but he knew that with each step forward, they were building a world where compassion and action could replace prejudice and indifference. The park was quiet as the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow over the benches and trees. Snoop Dogg sat with James on a weathered wooden bench, both of them watching children play nearby. For a moment, the weight of their journey felt lighter, replaced by a serene sense of accomplishment. "I still can't believe how much has changed," James said, his voice tinged with gratitude. "A few weeks ago, I was invisible. Now I feel like I'm seen for the first time in years." Snoop turned to him, a soft smile on his face. "That's how it should have been all along, man. Nobody deserves to be treated like they don't matter. It just takes one person to see the humanity in someone for everything to shift." James nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "It wasn't just one person, though," he said. "You started something bigger than both of us. The way people came together, offered their help. It restored my faith." Snoop leaned back on the bench, his hands resting on his knees. "That's the thing about compassion. It spreads. People see it, feel it, and they want to be part of it. Hate might make noise, but love makes waves." The sound of laughter echoed from a nearby group of veterans gathered under a gazebo. The hotel, now under new management, had been transformed into a hub for veteran support events. Tonight, it was hosting a community dinner to celebrate the success of Snoop's Veterans First initiative. James looked over at the gathering, his expression softening. "You know, if someone told me a few weeks ago I'd be standing here, inspiring others, I wouldn't have believed them. But you did. You saw something in me when no one else did." Snoop gave him a reassuring pat on the back. "You had it in you all along. I just reminded you it was there." As the two men stood, preparing to join the event, James stopped and turned to Snoop. "What you did, it wasn't just about helping me. It's about showing everyone what kindness can do. You're the real hero here." Snoop chuckled, shaking his head. "Nah, man. Heroes wear capes. I'm just out here trying to do what's right." The final scene unfolded as James stepped onto the gazebo stage to address the crowd. His voice carried a sense of hope and purpose as he shared his journey from homelessness to redemption. "One act of kindness saved my life," he told the audience. "Now it's our turn to do the same for others." The crowd erupted into applause, the sound reverberating through the park like a promise for a better future. As the camera panned away, capturing the setting sun and the gathering of people united by compassion, a simple truth lingered. Change begins with one person willing to stand up, Speak out and make a difference.